tracking a car. And that scared the living shit out of me, but it also put into focus the girls. And I said, oh my God, I believe those were two angels protecting my house. Now again, I said I could not understand what they were saying. I heard every word, but I had deduced that these two angels were sent to protect my home. They were outside in front doing a seance or something to put a shield over my home. And I know the shield was there because, again, you have a hellhound sitting there, staring at the house. He knew he wanted to be in that house. He knew what he wanted was over there, but he could not move. So what else could it be but the protective shield of the angels that were put there days before? And nothing happened after that. Maybe a year passed, and that's when Hurricane Katrina came along and put 6 feet of water in that house. But it's always been a story that my mind goes back to because of the strong, overbearing elements there. 2 women, 1 dog, 1 man, 1 house. And I would love to get some insight, some clarity if anybody else has experienced this, hopefully in those exact orders, or just having any experience with a hellhound and what came out of it, what, if they did not get the protective covering of the angels, and where it led them, what it led to, which is why I'm sharing the story with you, Black Dog Wars.
After my divorce, I moved into an old 2-bedroom home in New Orleans. My sons would come over to visit me every 2 weeks, and they enjoyed their bunk beds. My oldest slept at the bottom, and the youngest slept in the top bunk. Daily, strange things would happen around the house. Keys would be missing, cabinet doors would be left open. My youngest son finally told me that he didn't feel comfortable in the house alone with his brother. He claimed that when I would leave them alone, his brother's attitude would change and become very aggressive and mean. I didn't believe this at all. His older brother had always been protective and been very loving towards him. That night, I tucked him in and told him good night. When I went to tuck his older brother in the bottom bunk, he looked scared and said, "Dad, can you check under the bed? Someone is there." "Son, no one is under your bed," I said. He insisted that I check under the bed. I slowly lifted the cover, looking under his bed, and there, under the bed, I saw another him with black eyes, his index finger over his lips, gesturing for me to be quiet. I didn't say anything. I simply kneeled next to the bed and said a prayer, then looked under again, and the figure was gone. I sent my sons back to stay with their mother for the next week while I moved out of that house and into a new apartment. We haven't had any such problems since then. I wanted to keep our agreement and share with you in detail the issues and problems my wife and I have been experiencing over the past 5 years. 5 years ago, I was in a trucking business with a partner whose name I'll keep private for your safety. However, this individual was and still is a major drug dealer here in New Orleans. The picture that comes to mind when we talk about a drug dealer in New Orleans is a black man with his pants hanging down, looking crazy. This man is black, but he's nothing like what you expect. He attended one of the best universities in America, and also was in the U.S. military where he fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. He mingles with some of the most powerful people in the state of Louisiana, and this man can be found on the list of many political donation reports throughout the state. He and I met when I was looking for a partner to help me grow my business. Initially, I was not aware that he was a monster. However, as we got closer, I would notice how he was prone to violence and extremely paranoid. I finally realized that he was a murderer after a contractor was late paying us for one of the jobs we worked on. Two young black men came to my office who looked like they were straight out of prison, picked up a file with the personal information of the contractor, and 2 days later, he was found 100 miles away inside his car, dead. The car had been burned, and the body had bullet wounds to the head and chest. Naturally, I was not comfortable with this, and met with him to try and buy him out of the company. Well, that conversation ended with an argument in which he promised that he would drive me crazy and force me to commit suicide. A week after that conversation, I lost every city contract I had. When I went to City Hall to ask for a reason, I was stonewalled. Months later, I learned that he had donated to the campaign of a city councilman in exchange for him taking my contracts. Since then, I've been harassed by the police and street thugs. There are many stories I plan to share with you, but I wanted to give you some background information first. 2 weeks ago, my wife and I went to church, as we normally do on Sunday mornings. We parked our car in a lot next to the church, locked the doors, and went inside. It's a Southern Baptist church, so we're inside for almost 2.5 hours. When we came out, our car was moved from the parking lot and parked directly across the street from the front door of the church. This happens all the time now. I had the car computer reprogrammed to change the electronic code for the door locks, but still, they were able to get in. That same night, while we were sleeping, someone was locking and unlocking our car door in the driveway. This type of harassment has gone on for 5 years now. In another incident, my mother, who is 85 years old, was admitted to the hospital for surgery. I passed by her house to check up on things, and when I entered the home, I could smell the gas was on inside the house. I walked into the kitchen and discovered that all 4 of her stove eyes were on, and gas was all over the house. Had I walked in smoking a cigarette, which I normally did, the house would have blown up, killing me. Imagine this, driving down the street and being followed by an ambulance. No sirens on, but just being followed, while simultaneously your cell phone is constantly getting text messages, so many that your phone cannot operate correctly. My son, who was 25 years old, was ran off the road in his new Ford F-150 late one night while leaving the French quarters. He was driving when suddenly a car pulled up next to him. The person in the passenger side pulled the gun. He swerved to get away, ran off the road and into someone's house. I reached out to some friends of mine who are in the New Orleans Police Department, and they simply said that I have a major problem with one of the ranking officers. People on the force know about what's going on, and many of them are on the take. I have taken your advice and reached out to the contacts that you have provided, but so far I've heard nothing back. If this continues, I will have to relocate my family elsewhere. There's much more I'd like to share with you, but even as I write this message, my wife's car is beeping and making the sound of doors locking, then unlocking. Before I share this story with you, I need to give you some background information. I'm a former Army Ranger with extensive outdoors experience. I fought in several different areas of the world and found myself in some hairy situations. I identified with the outdoors. Up until this encounter, I can honestly say I never had any fear of an animal in the woods. Respect, yes, but fear, no. It was the summer of 2012. I had just finished a long divorce mediation and just wanted to get away from everything. My father wanted to catch a movie that same evening, so I decided to go fishing close to the city. I had a secret fishing spot in New Orleans East that was always good to me. It was a bit out of the way, but I liked this spot. It was peaceful. I left my house at 5 a.m., headed across town, and arrived at the Little Woods exit about 30 minutes later. The area I was going to fish was on the outskirts of Bayou Wildlife Refuge. It's an area of protected woodland and marsh that is on the outskirts of the city. To get to my fishing spot, I had to drive on top of the levee that protects the city from storm surge. After a 10-minute drive, I reached a barricade used to deter people from driving any further into the area. When I stepped out of my car, it was 5:45 a.m., and I grabbed my small cooler and placed my High Point .45 handgun into my tackle box along with my car keys. It was a bit foggy as I walked along the levee, and it reminded me of something out of a horror movie, but I thought nothing of it. The sun would be over the horizon soon and would burn the fog away quickly. My fishing spot was a solid 2-mile walk from where I parked. As the sun came out, I got excited. The last visit to this place, I caught a cooler full of fish. Now, a description of this area is needed in order for my story to make sense. The levee is elevated almost 11 feet above the surrounding ground level. When standing on the levee, to the left, at the base of the levee is a train track. Beyond that track is Lake Pontchartrain. To the right of the levee is Bayou Sauvage, a lightly forested wetland area. I finally reached the spot and descended down the levee towards the lake. I sat on my cooler and started to get my line in the water. My fishing line was in the water for about 35 minutes when I got my first bite. As I stood on the rocks with my rod high in the air, I noticed the train was coming down the tracks. I hated being caught trapped between the water and the train, so I quickly reeled the fish in and got him in the cooler. The train was still a ways off when I decided to climb up the levee. As I walked up the levee, I lit my cigar and took a puff. When I reached the top of the levee, I instantly felt an eerie feeling. I scanned the area, but didn't see anything. As I turned to see how far away the train was, I noticed movement at my 2 o'clock. Something was in the water, the bayou. I looked closer, and it was a head sticking out of the water. My initial thought was, what is a black bear doing in the bayou? Then I started noticing things. The head was huge, pointed ears like 2 black triangles on its head, and the snout was long and wide. I watched, thinking, man, this is a big bear, until I saw a shoulder come out of the water, and then came a long arm with claws. I verbally said, holy shit. My body was frozen, and my mind was telling me, bear. It looked at me. Its eyes reflected a yellowish color from the shade of the trees. At that point, my mind and body agreed it was time to get the hell out of here. I watched as it changed directions coming towards me through the water. Its head and shoulders began to elevate out of the water, and I heard a growl. This growl was nothing like I ever heard or felt before. I felt the vibration in my bones. As a ranger, I know what fear is, and this was not regular fear. This was primal fear. I turned and ran down the levee towards the train tracks, jumping across the train tracks, totally unconcerned about the fact that the train was bearing down on me. I needed to put something between me and this thing. I went straight to my tackle box and grabbed my weapon, put my back to the lake, and looked up the levee. As I chambered around, the train horn began to blare loudly. The conductor was looking in my direction, his eyes as big as his head. As he passed me, he pointed to the left, which was the other side of the levee. Instinctively, I began to run alongside the train. I felt my adrenaline kick in as I ran at a steady pace along the side of the train. The horn blew again, this time for 10 to 15 seconds. What was he telling me? I decided that trying to jump this cargo train was too dangerous in this situation. If I fell, I would be injured with this thing on my ass. I ran for what seemed like 12 to 15 minutes full speed, and I felt as if I would make it out of this situation. Then I patted my pants leg looking for my keys. Fuck! Fuck! I left the keys in the tackle box. I truly had no way of knowing how far I had ran, as a train obscured my view of the top of the levee. I could not see my car, nor could I see anything else. I looked back, and there were only 30 cars left before the train passed me, and I was alone. Although there was no other person there, the train made me feel safe. Only 20 cars left. I need to stop and catch my breath. 10 cars. I'm thinking about my dad and how we were supposed to go to the movies. I should have been nicer to him yesterday. 1 car left. I leveled my weapon and started up the levee. As I got to the top, nothing. But I still had that eerie feeling. I glanced to my right, and my car was about 50 yards away. So I ran full speed to my car. As I approached the side of my car, I slid to the ground trying to stop. I can't explain the feeling, but my body knew I was in danger. When I made it to my feet and looked back, there it was, standing at the edge of the tree line, nose in the air, sniffing. This thing was huge, so huge that I could see it clearly from 200 yards away. I could see the left profile of it. Its arms were long, with what looked like hands or claws. The chest was huge and tapered down to a small waist. It looked fast and strong. It sniffed in my direction and rolled its lips back, showing its teeth. At this point, I used my weapon to break my driver's door window and hopped in the car, pulling my spare key out of the glove box. When I looked up, it was on all 4 legs, or arms, and moving towards me. I cranked the car and threw it in reverse. I had to focus and drive backwards down the elevated roadway, and turned hard, spinning my car, and drove out. Dad with me. We lived in the same town, and I knew he would protect me. Now, I'm sure you're saying, dumb bitch, just call the police. But for me,